does somebody have to write an email every single day?
And in total, I've sold over 10 million worth of coaching through email alone.
Is this like a 10,000 word essay?
Welcome back to an episode of Beyond the Pump, where today we have a very special guest. Mike, I think I've known you, or Andrew and I have both known you since like 2021. So we're going on 4-ish years. You know, we won't let the truth get in the way of good marketing here. We'll round up to 4 years. But yeah, man, welcome. We're excited to talk about acquisition, but in maybe a different light for all of our coaches out there. So Mike, introduce yourself real quick for everybody.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. So I started in this industry a little over a decade ago as a personal trainer, then moved to a nutrition coach for another company, then started my own nutrition coaching business in 2018. I still have that today. And then I started getting a lot of requests from other coaches who wanted to understand how I scaled my business so quickly, because I'm not like all that entertaining on social media and I didn't have a huge following at the time. It's grown over the years, but mostly my business grew on email marketing. And I was doing the thing that not a lot of coaches were doing. And it wasn't because I was smarter or had any sort of insight. It was just a happy accident. I started writing a daily email and kept doing it, and it kept growing and people kept signing up for my coaching program. So that kind of launched me into more business coaching around like my specialty, which is copywriting, email marketing, and that whole world. So that's what I do now. I still have my nutrition coaching business, and now I help other coaches really, I guess you could say, in the business coaching space, but it's more targeted with email marketing, copywriting, and messaging. Those are my superpowers.
So what college did you graduate to learn all about this copywriting and email marketing stuff?
Well, I went to University of Maryland and I got my degree in communication. So I guess there's some relevance
I thought
there.
we were going to completely make fun of school right now and be like, no, I went for something else, but you got something in there.
I really didn't. I mean, communication, the story of why I picked that degree, I went to Maryland, and at the time I met with my guidance counselor and she was like, what do you want to do? What do you want to major in? I was like, I have no idea. And she's like, well, what are you interested in? And I was like, I like to play sports. And she was like, well, that's not really a major. And I was like, well, is there anything related to sports, like sports marketing and maybe anything in that field? And she was like, yeah, we don't really have that. The closest thing would be communications. And I was like, sure, sign me up. And that was how that all unfolded. Now, my stepdaughter's best friend is going to Maryland. They have this incredible sports marketing program that unfortunately was not there when I was
there. You get to live vicariously through her now and just kind of learn and, you know, be a good tutor and all those things.
Exactly.
So hang on, before we move on though, out of curiosity, you know, obviously you kind of tongue in cheek say like it might be some carryover. What are some things for people that might be considering a communications degree and obviously like aren't sold on that? What are some things they can expect to learn, and is there any transfer, and would you do it again?
The thing that stood out the most was actually speech writing. That was one of the hardest courses that I had to take, and it really got me out of my comfort zone because I'm very introverted, and I had to memorize speeches and stand up in front of the class and do the whole thing. That was the entire class, was 3 speeches. You had to write it, you had to memorize it, and you had to deliver it, and all different topics. But that really stretched me, because speaking in front of a crowd is typically, with most people, it's a big fear, and I had to get over that and get comfortable with it. And that did help me in standing on stages and speaking in front of coaches, which I've been fortunate enough to do, and giving presentations on fitness and nutrition. So I would say that was the biggest carryover for me, was actually the process of writing and delivering a presentation.
Do you think would you say that has to be hidden behind the paywall of an academic program, or is that something that people can do elsewhere?
You probably learn it, through experience. And I do think it helps to have some structure and learn, get your writing and your speech writing in particular with this topic, like to get some feedback on it from somebody who lives it and breathes it. So I'm sure you can do that outside of university, but yeah.
That makes sense. Well, I mean, you've mentioned this term copywriting, and prior to my time in outside of the education role, it was something that was unfamiliar to me. Maybe you can take a second and expand on as we segue into that, like what is copywriting, and maybe like why it's relevant for coaches.
Yeah. So the way that I define it is just being able to move people with the written word. Like there's an
Mm,
objective with what we're trying to accomplish when we're writing something. And typically what we're trying to do is evoke an emotional response and then ultimately move somebody to a decision. And I think it's important that I'm not sitting here saying move somebody to buy or move somebody to enroll or move somebody to give you money, but it's to move somebody to a decision. And that's really, I think,
mm,
important because sometimes copywriting or marketing, there's like this negative connotation as if we're trying to manipulate, but it's really trying to move somebody to the point of making a decision one way or the other. Uh, you'll hear people say like getting a no is just as valuable as getting a yes. At least you got somebody to make an
mm,
informed decision for themselves. And that's really the way that I view copywriting is I can do
mm,
that with the written word and, put that in an email, put that on a sales page and get somebody to the end of that email or to the end of that sales page. And I've, kind of created an emotional response that puts them in a position where they are ready to decide one way or the other. And that's kind of how I look at copywriting. I'm sure there's more traditional,
mm.
we could look at Webster, but I don't, I don't know what the actual definition, that's my definition.
I mean, Steve, you have your own experience in that. Is that like how would you define it? Because obviously you come
You
from the
write
marketing
emails
space
so
as well.
people buy shit that they don't need. No, totally joking. Totally joking.
I like Mike's. I like
No,
Mike.
I mean, I like the way you put it, Mike, because especially writing in today's world where social media is the thing, and I'd like to throw it out there, and I don't think you disagree, Mike, but obviously, if you do, share. Um, this doesn't mean you don't do social media. It's a in addition to social media, but for you, very much like me, I don't think I'm entertaining on social media. It's very hard for me to put myself out there and dance and do this thing and look like an idiot to try to get views and interactions and engagements. I'm just not good at it. So I do appreciate the idea of writing more. I get more engagement on Facebook because I get to write rather than Instagram because I got to sit there and talk to a camera that I'm like, my eyes are all over the place because I'm thinking and just all this stuff. So, I think when you started talking, you shared how you write an email every day or you have, and I'm going to ask you, how many days have you missed since you started, because I'm sure that number, but I'm also sure, knowing you, it's super small. um if if it even is not zero. But like, before we even jump to there, in order to start doing this thing, does somebody have to write an email every single day? And also, just for like the fun anchor, so people understand, like, hey, why should I listen to this dude about email? And why are we working on forming a partnership here? How big did you grow your business, if you don't mind sharing that too quick?
Sure. So the my nutrition coaching business grew to multiple seven figures. My first year in business, it was 500K, year one, which is pretty legitimate. And then year two was 750. Year three was 1.2 million. I don't remember exactly what I think the top number was 1.5. So I can't say. So when I say multiple seven figures, I'm not talking about in a single year. I'm talking about over many years. But
Mm,
in total, so it's over seven figures a year. And in total, I've sold over 10 million worth of coaching through email alone, through
wow.
my own business and through ghostwriting for other businesses. So ghostwriting is basically where I'm writing as somebody else, and then they're sending that email, and then they're getting paid based off of the work that I've written for them. So through my business and through other businesses that I've ghostwritten for, I've sold over 10 million in coaching, just coaching,
Okay, so
um,
we're
through
about to
email.
dive into something that is a at least a $10 million piece of advice coming up here, is what I hear us saying right now. Cool. All right.
Correct.
So, out of the gates, do I have to write an email every single day? Because I've not written an email for the past 10 years of my life.
No, definitely not. That's like a client who's never worked out before saying, do I have to go to the gym 7 days a week? Of course not. Our coaches are better than that. They know we start with the minimum effective dose. We start with what you can stay consistent with. Just sending an email once per week, you'll be light years ahead of most coaches. The other part of email marketing that I love is the competition is almost non-existent. So if we talked about like social media, anytime I show up on social media, I feel like I'm competing with these ridiculously talented creators who have all the best graphics, and
That's
they're funny and
crazy.
they're entertaining and they pull in and they're like, these transitions, they're using all these props and everything. And I'm like, who has the time for that? Whereas if you read email, even from like big companies who are 7-figure, 8-figure, 9-figure businesses, read their emails and you will not be overwhelmed at all. They suck. Just straight up. Like, email marketing is not done
Mhm.
well across the board. It is very
Mm.
effective. But if you look at like Walmart's email, it's like, we have a sale on lawnmowers or whatever the fuck they're selling. Like, there's no like talent. It's just, here's the promotion that we have, go buy it. Where if you're a coach and you can just get a little, like, be a C minus email writer, you are going to be in a class of your own, because there's just not that much competition. So being like somewhat
Mhm.
average at email, you're actually at the top of your class.
Well, I mean, I guess in that regard, when you say done well, and I'm clearly the least educated one in this domain, in this conversation. Like, what is something that's done well versus not done well for the audience, and mostly
Mike,
for me? Like,
Mike, I
how
feel
would
like
you
Andrew's version
describe
of an
that?
email is like Andrew's PubMed ID with a whole dissertation about shit. So sorry, Andrew.
So
Academic for life.
it depends on the intent. So I look at it as, if you are connecting with your audience through your emails, so they're getting to learn about you, your personality, your values, like that's super valuable. If you are solving a problem for your audience, like just one small micro problem that is bugging your ICA, your ideal client avatar, it's just that little pebble in the shoe that they can't get out, and you just give them some, how to, some action steps. Hey, I understand this pebble in your shoe problem, and I'm going to tell you how to remove it. That's done well. The thing that I find is not done well with email marketing is just, you're just kind of like regurgitating information without really
Hmm.
any purpose behind it. It's just like, let's talk about protein. And then we talk about protein, but like, why are we talking about protein? What's the intent of this email? What problem are we solving? Make it relevant to your audience. So if you can connect it, whether it's through a story, whether it's through, a solution to that problem, whatever the problem is, but make sure that you want to understand their problem. You want to kind of get inside the mind of the consumer and start speaking
Hmm.
their language. So it depends on what type of email we're talking about, but for the most part, there needs to be intent, there needs to be purpose behind it. But a
Hmm.
lot of times it's just information for the sake of information, or coaches just trying to sound smart, or they do this like
Hmm.
monthly newsletter and it's a recap of everything that's happened. It's overwhelming and it's all over the place. So those are some of the mistakes that I see with coaches who do actually implement email marketing, which is actually very few.
So you mentioned the word newsletter. My next question was going to be, I've not done any email, or very, like, I only send emails out when I remember or something like that, right? I'm just not consistent. Would a good first step maybe be just a weekly newsletter with some information and value type situation, or what is the best first step that you would suggest to somebody who's just trying to get consistent?
Yeah, be consistent. So pick one day of the week. We're going to start with once a week. And you're going to say Mondays, for example. Every single Monday at 9 a.m. Eastern, the email goes out no matter what. That's the first thing. Don't miss it. Like, pick the day, pick the time that it's going out, and don't miss. That's the first part. When it comes to like what to say, the easiest thing to do is just solve one problem for one person every single week. So every Monday, you're like, all right, I got to get this email out because I promised myself I would stay consistent. What am I going to write about? Well, think back to your client conversations you've had with leads, things that have come up, things that you've maybe heard on social media that kind of rubbed you the wrong way. There's endless ideas out there. But if you just boil it down to one problem for one person, at the end of the day, let me think about my client Susie, who had this problem that I helped her with last week. She kept overindulging every Saturday, and we worked through this together, and we came to a solution. And it was, now Susie doesn't binge every Saturday. Great. Well, there's a lot of people that could use that information. You solved a real problem that other people have. So there's your email. Hey, I'm going to tell you how I helped my client Susie stop overindulging every Saturday. That's basically the topic. And then you can go into
Mm,
how it was showing up for her, how you worked through it and the solution, and the end. Now you have a much better email than
mm.
most coaches would deliver.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, in that vein, it sounds like that's directive in terms of content specific. Like, is there a specific format? Like when you're talking and you say solve a problem, it's in my head, it's like, how long is this supposed to be? Is this like a 10,000 word essay?
Yeah.
Is this like, cause like we got a 10,000 word essay banked up, or is this something that you try to do in like a certain number of scrolls? Like when you're kind of thinking about the constraints of that content.
For email, I would not worry about the length.
Okay.
So like, this is one of the things where we can always get more advanced.
Yeah.
But we're starting with the basics. So like the most
Okay.
important thing, so as a structure for the email, you want to hook people in. Subject line, you got to get people to open it. So you want something that's compelling, create some curiosity, give an insight into what you're about to talk about. And it could even literally subject line, how I helped Susie overcome binge eating. Like that's enough of insight where people who have that problem are like, well, I want to learn how to
Mm,
stop that too. So I'm going to open this email. And then you've got your first line of the email, which is basically an
mhm,
extension of the subject line because we need people to keep reading. So you want to
mm,
hook them in again by giving them an overview of create curiosity. Here's what we're going to be talking about. Here's the problem. And then just give a little overview that helps the client know, the reader know that you understand what they're going through. So we're just kind of giving an overview of the problem that exists and maybe why it exists, right? Here's why this is happening. You might be restricting yourself throughout the week. You might be under eating carbs. You might be trying to diet for too long or whatever. So here's all the reasons why this might, manifest itself. And for my client Susie, this was what was happening with her. Then
mm,
you can go into some of the things that they may have tried and why those were ineffective. So a lot
mhm,
of times we try to solve this by just flexing more willpower and white knuckling our way through it, but that's not an effective strategy. You've probably already done that before. That doesn't work because it doesn't address the root of the issue. Okay, so now we've hooked attention, we've addressed the problem, we've addressed what conventional wisdom or other solutions they've tried that were ineffective, and now just give them the solution. Here's what to do instead. And then you can
yeah.
conclude with just depending on the type of email, it could just be purely value based. If you give this a try, hit reply, let me know how it goes. Would love to hear. If you have any questions, hit reply. I would love to answer any follow up questions that you have. Or you can connect it to your coaching program and be like, this is why every one of my clients that I work with goes through this, and this process to help them improve their relationship with food and achieve XYZ result. So you can either connect it to
Mm,
your coaching program or you can just leave it as strictly value based. But in the beginning, I
mm,
wouldn't worry too much about like trying to fit the perfect framework or length or structure. It's just get consistent with doing it,
mhm,
get consistent with solving problems, and then we can
mhm.
get more advanced as you progress.
Well, it sounds like there are different kinds of emails based upon what you just shared. Like, can you give the audience, me, different buckets to put those in?
Yeah, so we have like I typically go with different buckets of content, and I also have
Okay.
different like styles of so pretty straightforward. You can have like offer email, so like direct call to action email. It's like I'm trying to sell something, I'm trying to get an application, I'm trying to get a call, I'm trying to get something. I want you to take an action. Um, we can have strictly value driven or nurture driven emails. It's just I'm trying to warm you up. I'm trying to get you acclimated to my philosophy and the way that I do things. We can have strictly connection based, which is just I'm trying to get you familiar with me. So it's not about the coaching program. It's about me as a person. I want you to know me, like me, trust me, all that stuff that we need. Um, And then we can get into like different, there's like, pre-framing. If you have like a launch coming up, we're doing like a challenge, can we pre-frame and create excitement before the launch happens? Then there's, like the post-launch, all that stuff. So, but for the most part, just to keep it simple, as people are kind of getting into email, it's really just
Hmm.
two things. You're either nurturing or you're converting. And the nurture
Okay.
bucket, that can be sliced a number of different ways, but it's really those two: nurture or conversion.
Mm.
So
We
as
call
you
nurture.
kind of talk through this, there's obviously a lot of ways somebody can go. So step one, if you're not doing it, start doing it. Mondays 9 a.m. or whatever is appropriate for you. Figure out a conversation you have, solve one problem for one person, and just put it out there. Because and I love the way you kind of position that. What, through your history of writing emails, because at some point in time you were just starting out and one email a week, one problem, one person. What would you say is one of the biggest aha moments that happened for you? Because it's like everything else we do, we got to bang our head up against the wall for quite some time before we start to like feel that win coming, and then we get intrinsically motivated because we know, okay, cool, this is on the other side. So what was that thing for you to start seeing? And roughly, how long can people maybe expect to really have to commit to this thing for before they might feel those wins happening?
Yeah. So for me, it was just how powerful stories are. And my own story, that was the thing that I noticed when I started growing my business, is like almost every client, when I asked them, like, what made you reach out or what made you sign up, it was always my story. And I was just writing about stuff. I didn't have any of the experience at the time. I was new to email marketing and all of that. And just telling, like, even today, like, I'll still share struggles. I'll still share things that I'm trying, that I'm struggling with. If I have a bad day mentally, I still have a little bit of body dysmorphia. I'll talk about that. People always connect. Those are the things that always stand out. When I share that stuff, I always get people reaching out and they're like, this is me. Thank you so much for speaking out about this. Thanks for sharing your story. So I think that's another part of it, is like solving the problem. But most of the time, coaches get into coaching because we've had our own journey. Like, I was fit and athletic, and then I was overweight and fat, and then I got lean again, and then had some disordered eating. So like my own journey led me to want to coach others. So I just talk about those struggles and how I overcame them and how I solved those problems for
Hmm.
myself. That stuff connects big time. So don't be afraid to talk about yourself and your own story. And
Hmm.
I would say that in terms of how long, it really depends, because I had somebody who had a 14-person email list, 1 4. So like, that's very small. You can find 14 people right now. Like today, you could go find 14 people to join your email list. And he sent out one email that I had him write and enrolled a client immediately. So it's like, that's the extreme version of like instant conversion.
Mm.
It doesn't happen all that way. Like, usually what I say is, can you be consistent for 30, 60, 90 days without the expectation of anything in return? If so, then that's what you should expect. Um, be consistent for 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. And here's the other part about it. So I learned this when I started tracking my data more diligently. If something converted, I would always look at the conversion, like the thing that happened right before the conversion. Like, they clicked on this ad and that's the thing that sold them. But then I started looking through like a tracking software that actually tracks the whole customer journey. And I'm like, wait a minute, that was just like the last thing. They actually opened like 6 emails before that. They clicked
Hmm.
on this link and watched a video. And so a lot of times people are like, oh, well, this thing isn't converting, but it actually is. It's if you think about your own experience, typically we don't see something once and then just throw money at it. Usually it's like, we see it, we remember it, we see it again, we're like, oh, that's that thing I saw. Then we maybe are like, get some more information about it, and then you're like, especially with brands out there where you're like driving, you see a billboard and then you see a commercial and then you see like, oh, this thing keeps popping up, maybe I should go to their website and check out what they do. So like which was the thing that moved the needle? Well, it was everything. It was the awareness that it
Mhm.
exists, and then it was the ad that told you more about what it does, and then it was their website that gave you like so. The email
Mhm.
is just a part of that. It's a part of the nurture
Mhm.
process that moves people along. So it's like there's the whole ecosystem. It's not just one
Mhm.
thing. But the nice part about it is when you are consistent with email, you're constantly moving people along with that, more trust, more authority building, conditioning them to the way that you do things and your personality and your values and your coaching.
Mhm.
And so you might not get the immediate like hit reply and buy on the spot, but you may have somebody that fills out an application and you're like, oh, well, they filled out the application from Instagram. That must have been the thing that convinced them. But if you look back, they might have been the one that opened up like 10 emails in a row, found you
Mhm.
on Instagram and found your application, and it was actually all of your emails that converted them.
As you're talking about that, it sounds like what I used to do in high school, which was when I didn't know the answer to a test and it was an essay question, you just write long enough and eventually you trip into the right answer. And it sounds like with emails, if you just do it long enough, they'll eventually buy
It
something.
is. Yeah. Yeah. It's such a great nurture platform, like so underutilized. And the funny thing is that all the statistics are out there. So
Mhm.
anybody can go to Google. And I highly recommend if you're a coach, you do this and just go to Google and say, what is the average ROI for email marketing? Just type that in and you'll be blown away. Every single year, email crushes every other platform and it's not even close. Like crushes when it comes to dollar spent, return on investment for email marketing. No social media channel comes close. Nothing else comes close. Every single year, email is number one.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you're definitely a strong proponent of that. You mentioned a word specifically called nurturing, and we've kind of danced around the topic a little bit in previous episodes, but I don't think we've ever explicitly defined it. How would you define nurturing? How is that important to a coach? And what are some other alternatives to email so that way they have a frame of reference?
Yeah. So the way that I look at nurture is we're moving somebody along the buyer's journey or the customer journey or however you want to define it. So I look at it as kind of like 5 steps. You've got the first phase, which is completely unaware. I don't know what I don't know. I don't even know that I
Mhm.
have a problem. Then and those people are hard to reach, so I typically don't
Mhm.
mess with that group. Like if I don't
Mhm.
like this is somebody who if we're talking about weight loss, like maybe they're overweight, but they don't care. They're just living their
Mhm.
life and it's not a problem for them yet.
Mhm.
Or maybe it never will be. They're just in that bucket of I don't think I have a problem or I don't even care that I have a problem. Then there's the problem aware, which is like, oh man, I tried
Mhm.
to keep up with my kids on the playground and like I got out of breath pretty quickly. Like this weight is kind of an issue. Then we go into solution aware, where they're like, oh, there's actually ways that I can lose weight. There's things that I can do to become, get in better shape and help,
Mhm.
it'll help me chase my kids around. Um, and then we go into um, offer aware, which would be like Steve has an actual program that solves this specific problem. So now I'm offer aware. Not
Mhm.
only is there something that helps me, but Steve has something that helps me. And then we go
Mhm.
into fully aware where Steve says, hey, would you like to join this program? And I'm like, yes, this is exactly the moment that I've been waiting for because I have this problem. I need the
Mhm.
solution. I like your solution. So sign me up. And now that's like the fifth stage. So
Mhm.
nurture is just moving people along from problem
Mhm.
aware, solution aware, offer aware to fully aware when they're ready to move forward. That's
Mhm.
really how I define nurture. And then
Yeah, I mean,
other opportunities for that, we're doing podcast is great, social
mhm.
media, email, text, communities, all there's a million different ways to nurture.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, it sounds like the options are endless. So, then why is it specifically that you like email?
Yeah, I've just found that it's you're not asking that much, right? The email
Mm,
lands in the inbox, and
mhm,
typically, if it's compelling, people are going to open it and read it. But it's
mm,
nice because they can kind of do it on their own terms. Like social media is
mhm,
so quickly like posts are
mhm,
every 5 seconds and they're inundated with all these other creators and it's hard to stand out and to catch
mhm,
your audience at the right time. And typically I can't remember what the numbers are, but you're maybe reaching like 1% of your audience with
mhm,
each post. Whereas email,
Mm-hmm.
if I land in the inbox, like that's a more intimate, like this
Mm-hmm.
person has taken the next step. They're like, I'm giving you contact
Mm-hmm.
information because I want you to email me. So it's kind of like the relationship has progressed. It's almost like the analogy that I use is like,
Yeah.
if I'm like in a bar and there's like a crowded room, I can start shouting stuff to the room and like maybe some people will listen,
Mm-hmm.
but it's like the odds of that landing are pretty slim versus the person who is like, yes, I want to sit down and have a drink with you. Now we have this like one-on-one conversation. That's kind of more of what email
Mm-hmm.
is. They've taken the next
I
step in the
see.
relationship. They're like, yeah, come on into my world. Let's sit down and talk. I want more of what you're offering.
Mm-hmm.
And again, like it's not like the email goes away unless they delete it. So it'll sit there in their inbox. And then, when they have a moment free at work or when they get home from work or first thing in the morning or
Mm-hmm.
whatever,
Mm-hmm.
um, most of the time the emails are read within the first hour of it being sent. So typically you're going to get a lot of people
Jesus.
who, especially if you're consistent and you're sending them at the same time, you start to condition your audience and they expect it. If I've had moments where I've had like a tech issue and my email
Mm-hmm.
delivery software was delayed like a couple hours, and I had people messaging me like, "Hey, where was your email this morning?" I'm like, "Oh, it's coming, just some software issues." No, like, but people start to expect this is the
Mm-hmm.
time that it's going to be delivered and they start to look forward to it. So I find that for those reasons, it's a little bit more of an intimate setting with
Mm-hmm.
somebody. They've already progressed the relationship forward,
Mm-hmm.
and they can kind of read it at their own time, and it doesn't get lost in the craziness of social media. I think it's an effective, and podcast is similar. I think podcast does, is another great opportunity for like
Mm-hmm.
longer form
Mm-hmm.
nurture.
Yeah. Well, and it's
I'll
go
let you
ahead,
go,
Steve.
and then I'm going to jump in.
Yeah, I have one more question. So, like, when you consider the nature of, and I think I can't remember who it was, but they said, "Oh, my post only got 100 views," and then it shows a room of actually 100 people. I think having clear goalposts are really important for people to wrap their brain around this as they start to get in there. Obviously, like the subject matter, the length, the formatting is going to evolve as they become more sophisticated, but is there something that would be a reasonable expectation from an outcome, such as like, hey, I've had, I think open rate is something that some people might start to get sucked into. Like, what are the top two or three things that people should pay attention to determine if they're moving in the right direction?
Yep.
And it's having a positive effect.
Yeah, open rate's a good one. You want to look at, are people actually reading them? So especially
Okay.
in the early phases, early stages of email marketing, like you want at least a 40% open rate when you're
Mm,
smaller. As your list grows, it'll go down, just by the nature of growing, speaking to a larger audience. But for the most part, in the beginning, most of the time, people who are in that like first 500 subscribers, you should be in that 40 to 50% open rate range. So that is
okay.
something to pay attention to. The other thing is like, are you actually getting replies? Are you getting click throughs if you're posting a link? So like the call to action, if it's a reply, are people engaging? If it's a link, are people clicking on it? If you're like, connecting it to a podcast
Mhm,
episode or to your Facebook
mhm,
community or to a training that you did, or to an application or to sign up
mhm,
for something, like whatever it is, are they taking
mhm,
the action? So those are
mhm.
those are like the main ones that I would look at: click through rate, open rate, and then are people actually responding and engaging?
Okay. And then when they get really sophisticated, what 50 things should they? Oh, no, I'm kidding.
So,
Kidding.
as we near the end of this, and for those of you listening, this is going to be a 2-part series, which is going to be exciting. I'd love for you, Mike, to kind of share in a minute or two what we have to look forward to in the next episode, right? Because you're obviously leading community, you're helping a lot of people with email. We're working on finalizing our partnership to give everybody in our world access to this. So just talk about that a little bit. Let's set that really good hook. Let's make sure they understand why they're going
Yeah.
to come back, and let's set that trap, if you will.
Yeah. So I found that the power of email marketing, there's so many capabilities that we have. And a lot of it can be done through automations and systems that don't require you to constantly like do all of the work. Like with social media,
Mm,
we're constantly doing the posting and coming up with
mhm,
content, all of those things. So like, for example, taking a new subscriber and taking them through like a welcome sequence that triggers automatically when somebody signs up for your list. They get a series of emails that warms them up and nurtures them and presents an opportunity for them to step forward and fill out an application and book a call. That's something that you don't have to constantly do. You set it and you don't forget it, but you just set it and you monitor and see how the results are. But there's so many capabilities like that. Following up with leads, not letting leads slip through the cracks, having series and sequences that go out automatically. There's ways to kind of filter your audience with people who are, more avid readers versus people who don't really open your emails. So you can start to create buckets of warmer leads versus colder leads, which creates more opportunities to like reach out to the people who are more ready to buy. All of that takes a lot of work, but I found a lot of shortcuts in that process. So that's pretty much what I've spent the last couple of years building, is a platform and a way and a membership for coaches to automate, to find like best practices, to set things up in a way that is very streamlined and efficient. So it's kind of like this all-in-one system that makes getting new subscribers, nurturing your subscribers, and converting your subscribers a lot more streamlined and efficient. So that's kind of what we're going to be talking about on the next episode, which I think most coaches need, because again, there's a lot of powers and capability, but it can be a lot of time. So I've kind of done a lot of the heavy lifting for everyone who wants to take advantage.
And being that I already know what's on the other side of this, you did all of that stuff and have it all set there, templated out, and making life easier for somebody for less expensive than what it would actually cost them to go have their own platform through another company. So it's almost like one of those just no-brainers where it just, not only is there a shit ton of value, it's like stupid high value in terms of it's just cheap for what you get. Like Mike literally built something that is 10x, feels like I'm undercutting what it actually is, but 10x the value of what they have to pay. So,
yeah, I would 100% agree with that.
Well, anyways, Mike, we appreciate you coming to hang out for the day. We can't wait for round 2. For those of you listening in, go find Mike on social media. We'll link it in the notes. Really good guy. He does a lot of dancing things on the TikTok and the Google. So definitely go look. But I would encourage you just to kind of go check Mike out. We are going to have round 2. We appreciate spending some time today, and for you listening to Beyond the Pump, where we break down the fitness of business, where we break down the business of fitness and nutrition. If you don't subscribe, if you haven't liked us, hit that like button. If you haven't subscribed, smash that subscribe button, and we'll see you next time, gang.